elements in Photoshop. You guys have learned a workflow to do in tone paper that's not going to be that different from what we do in Photoshop. So just to give you an idea of what you guys are going to do, you're going to create a progression of shapes like the spheres that you can see here, from full matte to a chrome sphere, right? So if we start analyzing how things kind of work here, we have a matte sphere that I could, for example, I could turn off all the reds if I wanted to. I won't. But you'll see this is the kind of thing that you would usually render, right? It's got a highlight, it's got a core shadow, and it just works like that, right? On the opposite side, we have the chrome sphere, in this case in a hypothetical environment outside, and completely reflecting its environment faithfully, right? So you're even doing the colors and all, right? So in between you can do different things. In this case, here you have what would be some sort of automotive paint where you actually reflect the environment, but it's still, everything is still kind of under a key of red. And if you look at this one, this kind of lives somewhere in between both of them. And it's kind of like if you had this matte sphere and you would get transparent lacquer and just put a coat around it, right? So you still can see that highlight and that core shadow in that sphere over here, right? While in this one, we see the rules of reflectivity that we've been practicing in the shapes that you've done in the last week. All right, so just to get you an idea of what we'll be working on. So originally, I was gonna have you do a sheet of spheres, a sheet of cylinders, a sheet of cones, a sheet of this, a sheet of that. I think that would be a little bit lengthy. So again, faculty, sorry that I changed something. I was just trying to get this demo yesterday, and it was a lot of busy work, I think, because you guys, well, depending on what you have on your wall, you may already got that. So we're going to actually go and work on some of the shapes of the concave convex forms that you guys have used, which are a little bit more fun, they're a little bit more interesting, and also a little bit more complex, right? So just to get you an idea of what this is, again, we see the matte shape that you guys know how to do. It's got a 1, 2, 3. Notice that I gave it a little bit of thickness, so it felt that it had substance, so I think you should do the same. Then we have kind of like a transparent lacquer version of it, although in this case it does look a little bit more like automotive paint, but it's still the same kind of like matte reflectivity with just, sorry, matte shading with a little bit of reflectivity on top. And as we go to the next, we see a more mirror-like shape that follows the rules of reflectivity like we use now. And then we see a chrome shape that is reflecting everything, okay? So let's see how these ones are built so you understand what you will be doing later. I'm going to share this file with your professors, and you'll notice that each and every one of those shapes is in its own layer. And I think this one, okay? So all of this, let me turn this one off, came from the actual sketch that I already did. And that's perfectly valid to do. If you already have one that you like, do it. If the ones that you got are not good, they're either off perspective or they have some mistake, I would say try and get a little one that's a little bit better. But the cool thing about this is that I already kind of understand where all my different shapes are going to be, right? So basically the way I worked about this is to first create a matte rendering of this shape. Let me save it with a different name. So I can, oh well, we can work on it like that. So the first thing I did was to actually create a path that goes all around it, right? You guys know this one. So the next thing that I did was I filled, okay, so I moved this one. Let me, okay, I'll just create a new one. So I created that path that goes around the shape. I called it shape contour, so it's always there. It's very important that this path is continuous, doesn't have any bumps. Then I got kind of like a mid-gray, and I fill that in, right? You'll notice that I actually forgot to give it some thickness, so actually I had to come and get a little bit of that shape, similar to what I have at these corners, right? So now that I have this, which I'm gonna see my shape contour, I duplicate it just so that I always have something to fall back on if I screw up. But then this next one, remember the keyword here, or the key is the lock transparency button over here, and then going to black and white on your brush. You will use a soft brush with very low opacity, let's say 10%, and basically start adding probably some shadow. Okay. I'm going to change my brush. I think I'm using a brush with a little texture, and that's what's slowing down my computer. Hold on a second. Okay. Just going to select the appropriate brush. Okay, so you start adding probably a little bit of darkness here that's looking away from my light source. I do the same here because that's kind of looking down. And then I'm gonna get a little bit of light to show it there, right? So I have kind of like that basic shape there. Then the next thing that I would do, according to my sketch, is find that little surface at the top and that little surface on the side. And I don't think I saved those paths, so I'll quickly work with them. All right, so probably got there. Okay, I'll make a selection, and I'll have my radius feathered. So I choose my brush. I want it to be lighter than the rest of it, and I make it work, and there we go. Right, so I'm gonna do the same with this guy here. All right, I'm gonna try to be as faithful to my other line as possible. Remember, I'm using Control to go back and modify the selections. Okay, so I click the point. Right, so again, I'm gonna make my selection. And now I'm gonna darken that side, right? So we get that thickness. I also created this path that I actually moved it for a different shape. But it used to live here. Okay. Okay, so in the same way, I'm going to create my selection here. And remember, if I do Command or Control H, I can hide this. So again, with a big brush, I can start finding that little gap there. Okay, so far so good. You guys know how to do this. Probably do an interesting part line there, in which case I would just kind of like create that path over there, create a new layer for my black part line. Right? Choose a hard brush and make it really small, probably around, I don't know, 4 pixels. And then I right click, stroke path, make sure that's set to brush, and click OK. I can barely see it because my opacity is very low, so I'll just increase it and repeat. All right, so now I have that work path. Sorry, that part line. Now I'm going to get my white part line, and I'm going to repeat the operation. In this case, I'm going to use a white color line. Maybe I'm going to make it a little bit thinner. Right click, stroke path, OK. Right? Deselect that. And then all I'm going to do is by hitting V or selecting the arrow and then using my mouse keys, I can move it, and there I go. I have my part line, right? So far so good. You guys should be masters at this point of this operation. You have your matte shape. Okay? So then you group all these guys together and you create your matte shape. So, oh, what am I missing? I'm missing, yes, highlights. And I should have saved those paths, so I'm gonna have to kind of like remake them. But then yes, we want to have those highlights going over that edge. I'm going to click escape. Then I'm going to choose a soft brush in this case. I'm going to choose a layer. I'm going to do it under my part lines. Stroke path, okay. If I want it to be really, really sharp, maybe that's what I want, but maybe I want it a little bit more nuanced, so I'm going to go to 7. Stroke path, okay. And now, I don't probably want this to be all continuous and that's wrong, so I'm going to play with transparency. And I'm going to play with a soft eraser with low opacity to make this be less shiny when light is not hitting it than when it is hitting it, right? So I'm going to do the same thing with this guy, stroke path. I'm going to click OK. I'm going to get rid of I'm going to get rid of that later on, but same thing. Get rid of that. And we're only missing the one up here. And there we go, probably this little guy there. Right, so now we have our matte shape. And that's what we have. But we can also work on that shape and actually shade it as it would be that reflective thing, right? So I'm going to duplicate all my highlights and hard lines, so they're part of my next rendering. And well, I also probably need that contour. I'm going to take it out of that group. And there we have that shape, right? Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to path out those areas of reflectivity. So in this case, I actually have one path that I saved from yesterday, and I'm going to make that selection, but now I don't want